Thank you very much. And as it's wonderful to be here again this time of year. And this is in loving memory of my father on his 53rd yard site, and my mother-in-law, who is fifth generation Sabra, on her second yard site. So I always start with some song. And during the Lul, we say Psalm 27 every day. So I'm going to sing the verse Achat Sha'alti, and if you want to just share the handout that I put up, just if you want to follow along. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Achat Sha'alti me'et Adonai otavakesh. Achat Sha'alti me'et Adonai otavakesh. Shivti b'veit Adonai kol yemei chayai. Lasod b'noam Adonai uvaker b'yechalo. Lasod b'noam Adonai uvaker b'yechalo. The translation for this verse that I love is from our own Sheila Peltz Weinberg. I seek only one thing alone, to connect to this moment, nowhere else. Only this, nothing less, my palace in time. You can take down the share. Thank you. And the reason I like this verse in particular is the teaching is to connect to hearing the shofar in this moment. In brief, creating an environment of stillness and silence, sounding the shofar and seeing what arises. As Rabbi Mark Margolius has taught, the shofar is the tuning fork of the soul. And one of the teachings from the Talmud about the shofar is that it's essential on Rosh Hashanah that both the blower and the listener blow and hear with intent. And so while this will focus on the intention, the kavanah of the listener, discussion of the development of my kavanah when I sound the shofar is another story. Contributed greatly to my teaching with Rabbi Rachel Cowan of blessed memory and Rabbi Marcelo Bronstein at B'nai Jeshurun. And I'll be holding a session at B'nai Jeshurun in a couple of weeks about the shofar and silence. So for many of us, the quintessential experience of Rosh Hashanah is the sounding of the shofar. We plan the timing of our arrival to the synagogue to be there on time, not too early, just so we're able to find our seat or find the person who went early enough to save us a seat. And at the time of the shofar service, the rabbi then imparts words of wisdom. We stand, we listen, and it's over. And we have many thoughts. Most commonly, that was amazing. The Tekiyah Gedolah was so long. It was better last year. They had some issues, and so on. But how often are we really present at that moment, one with the sound of the shofar and the Baal Tekiyah, not as observers, but as participants? Have we prepared ourselves for hearing the sound of the shofar? And as you know, the tradition is for the shofar to be sounded every day during the month of Elul. And this affords us the gift of preparing, exploring the meanings of the shofar, and being aware of what arises in us when we hear the sound of the shofar in Rosh Hashanah. After the shofar is sounded in Rosh Hashanah, when you are there, can you pause and notice with some period of silence before saying Yashar Koach? That's the challenge. The intention, the kavanah of this sit is to help us prepare to hear the sound of the shofar, but in a setting of stillness and silence, so we can be aware of the still small voice. Frank Ostaszewski, who wrote a book called Five Invitations, wrote about silence, saying deep silence is not merely a pause between sounds. It takes us beyond the known, beyond language, and into the sacred. The sacred is not separate or different from all things. It is hidden in all things. So what I'm going to do is guide you to help you with being in a place of stillness and silence. And from this place of stillness, hear the sounds of the shofar and be aware of what arises with compassion and without judgment. And I invite you to have an intention for our brief time together. Even as simple as having the opportunity to pause, take a breath, notice the sounds of the shofar, and just take a couple of moments just to think, what's your intention for our time right now? So let yourself sit in an upright yet comfortable posture. When you're ready, you can close your eyes if you're comfortable or hold a soft gaze. And I invite you to take a few deep breaths, breathing in fully through the nose, then a brief pause, and slowly exhaling through the mouth as with a sigh. This type of breathing actually has been shown to increase the relaxation response. So do this 2 or 3 times at your own pace, and then let the breath settle into its natural rhythm. So I'll do it, and then you do it at your own pace. Notice if there's any obvious tension in the body that you can release easily, and do so. Let the eyes and face be soft. Loosen the jaw. Loosen the tongue. Relax the shoulders. Let the arms and hands rest easily. Let the belly be soft and the breath natural. Let the heart be soft as well, to receive whatever arises with loving awareness and compassion. Now, with this embodied presence, bring a kind and gentle awareness to the breath. If the breath is not comfortable, anchor. You can choose another, such as sensations or even sounds. But if it's the breath, feel the sense of your body breathing. The in-breath, the out-breath, the transitions in between. Let's take some moments to invite a sense of calm and ease to grow. Whenever you notice your attention has wandered, and you're not with your intention to be with the breath, you can choose to return gently to the next breath, to Shuva, to return, and return to the present moment. And feel your body as a field of sensations, letting everything happen, tingling, vibrating, warmth, coolness. Include sound, so you're not listening with the ears, but with your whole awareness. Listening to and feeling this whole living moment. Be aware of emotions that are present. Anticipation, anxiety, boredom, happiness, sadness, whatever. And during the quietness, thoughts naturally arise, and sense the possibility of noticing them and then relaxing back into this living field of awareness. Rest in the space, the silence between the thoughts, and hold them with loving awareness. I invite you to allow your mind now to rest naturally. No need to focus on anything. Just be aware and present in a relaxed and open way. And notice how you are just now before the sounding of the shofar. Without judgment, without the need to change anything. Bringing kind attention to each moment. So I'm now going to sound the shofar, but I'm going to sound 3 lines of the shofar. Tekiah, the single straight note. Shvarim, the moaning, crying, if only. Truah, the brokenness of the 9 short staccato notes, and back to Tekiah. The next line is Tekiah, Shvarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Truah, and then Tekiah Gedolah. A long, straight note that can feel like hope, can feel like impermanence, because, as we know, like, it always ends. And I'll do them with a brief pause in between, but fairly continuous. All right. So hear the sound of the shofar. Just notice what arises. And we'll sit in silence. Just notice where your thoughts are. Notice any sensations. Notice your emotions. With loving awareness and acceptance. Now invite your mind to rest naturally. No need to focus on anything. And just be present in a relaxed and open way. May our practice be for the benefit of all beings.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everybody. I hope you'll stick around for at the top of the hour. We'll have some chance for conversation and questions and reflection in the chat. Before then, though, if you are remembering a loved one today or loved ones or others that you want to include their name in the chat, you're welcome to put them down. And then Rachel, who is supporting us today on the tech side of things in the background, has put up the text of the Mourner's Kaddish. You're welcome to unmute and join me in reciting the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal,
Yitgadal,
B'Yitgadash,
B'Yitgadash,
Shemei
Shemei
Rabbah,
Rabbah,
Be'alma
Dhamma
dibra
Kibate,
firute
Be'alus
b'chol
Mafute,
b'chaye chol
Bechon
yamei
V'Bechon
chol
Chaye Chol
b'chaye
Beit
b'chol
Israel
Beit
V'Agala
Yisrael
Bizman Karim
Va'agala
V'Hibru
v'Hibru
Amen.
Amen.
Yishmei Rabban Bavarach Olam Olamei Omayach
Amalia.
Yisbarach
Rafi
Yishtabach
Ishtabach
V'Yifar
Yitrach
V'Yitavach
V'Yadar
V'Ar
V'Yadar V'Yisavach Shemei
V'Yisrael
V'Yishav
V'Yitavach
Hashmer
V'Yitavach
V'Yitval
Ela
V'Yishusha
Mishpata
Chata
Vishirata
V'Shirata
Tishrata
Tishkata
Tirchata
Miran
V'Shirachata
Biamal V'Yimru
Tirchata
Amen.
Rabbanim
Shem
Rabban
Be'alma.
Shema
Shalom
Amen. Al
Yehi
Yisrael
Shlama Rabba
Amen.
Mishmaya Chayim Aleinu
Oseh
V'Kol
Shalom
Yisrael
B'Mimra
Yimru
Uyaseh Shalom Aleim
Shalom
V'Al
V'Hu
Yisrael
Ya'aseh
V'Kol
Shalom
Yisrael
Aleinu
V'Yimru
V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Al Kol Yoshvei Tevel.
Amen.
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 Thank you, everybody. Okay, so if you have a question, we invite you to share it. Just put question in all caps in the chat so that we can distinguish, and you're welcome to comment and respond to each other. That's often part of one of the best parts of this part of our set. Just always a reminder and request to just practice Shmirat HaDibur, mindful speech, and just using good judgment about how we are speaking to one another. So, and all the more so that it's Elul now. So we're that we have that on our mind. So, John, this is as you noted, as we noted, this is an annual ritual. It's become in the 5 years of the set. There's actually a question that already came in from Francine, which I want to get to in a moment. But I'd also like to invite folks. You had asked what came up for folks during the sit in hearing the shofar, and I think that's that might be the first place actually to start, is just to ask everybody, if those who want to share, if there's anything in particular that that came up for you that you feel like you want to share. John, you spoke so beautifully about, I'll paraphrase in my own words. The shofar is this amazing sort of pre-verbal and maybe post-verbal, right? It's on both sides of language, as it were, right? And invites us to just sort of live into that and to transcend language, or to get back to a time. So much of our mindfulness practice, we could be focused on noticing when thoughts are occurring, the same way that sensations occur, right? And to be able to step back from that. But now's a chance, the main way we get to do that, if it's not an artistic medium and otherwise, is, at least in a chat box, is definitely in words. And so, just a lot of, there's a number of folks that have commented already. Just reading through some of these. The sound of the shofar went right to my heart. It was unnerving. The shofar took me to a profound place of compassion for someone I have a lot of judgment toward. I'm grateful and in tears. Hearing the shofar is hearing the breath. I felt it in every single crevice of my broken heart. Deep sadness, a primeval wail. How the brokenness of the shvarim and the truah were healed by the Tikiyah Gedolah. Carol says the final note seemed to say, "Give this all you got, your whole breath, your full attention, your whole soul."
So let me
Yeah.
comment. Let me comment specifically on that one,
There you
because
go.
and this is part of a teaching I often give about what my kavanah is, either for the series of notes, or for, I have a kavanah sometimes for each specific note. And for the Tekiyah Gedolah, and excuse me if you heard me tell this story before, my usual reaction first when I'm hearing somebody else do it is to look at my watch. Right? Full disclosure, right? My first reaction is not being with what's happening, it's comparing and seeing how it is. What I ask the congregation to do when I'm doing the Tekiah Gedolah is to be with me, because what I'm trying to do is to make it never end. I'm trying it to last forever. And for that reason, I sometimes believe it's the sound of impermanence, because it always ends. And you can ask any shofar blower, once you start it, you have no control over it. I mean, you're a wind player. Once you control it, once you start it, you have no control over it's going to be long or short, or I mean, I lost it later on. I mean, all those things happen sooner or later, and I have no control over that. And what I ask the congregation is not to be a passive listener, but can they hear when I'm sounding Kiyad Golah? Can they hear my struggle of making it last, trying to make it last forever?
Yeah. Beautiful. There's a bunch of questions that have come in. A lot of them having to do with this question about being the shofar blower. This is you get to be this is pulling back the curtain. Everybody's asking their shofar blower questions here. So I see Catherine's question here. Well, there was, you responded, I think, to the very first question that came in. I think. I just want to make sure we got that. I'm missing it now. I don't think it was actually labeled as a question. But I'm curious to know how it feels to be Jon, how it feels to you to be on the blowing side, the giving side of blowing the shofar. It's so powerful to be on the receiving end. I felt I was inhaling the energy of Jon's exhale. That's so. I may let's go in order. I'm curious
So
about how
that's
you respond to that
wonderful.
one.
And first, I don't know whether it was shared. I'm doing a teaching at B'nai Jeshurun in a couple of weeks, where some of this I may go on in detail. But sort of the answer to the question depends on when you're asking me. Because I've been sounding the shofar for 60 years. That's a long time. And for the first 50 years, it was a performance. My kavanah was as a performance. This was a performative act, and that's what I was trying to do. There are things that interrupted that. September 11th, as you may remember, Rosh Hashanah was right after that. And I felt such pressure that I really had to do this well for the congregation, and it was terrible. It was terrible. And I felt terrible about that. There's another time it was terrible. And through a teaching through B'nai Jeshurun, they decided to get all the Baltikiyas, all the shofar blowers, and teach them about what the notes mean and what the shofar means. Sort of changed my whole approach about what I was trying to convey and transmit, and then working with our beloved Rachel Cowan. It's about it. And so it's changed over time. So now when I'm sounding the shofar, there's almost no concern about the technique of sounding the shofar, especially with this shofar that I have now. It's what am I trying to transmit? Whether it's an overall teaching about being a bridge, or changing from a seat of judgment to compassion, or the individual notes like shvarim, I want it to sound like a cry. That's supposed to sound like a cry, as if you said, if only in a wail. So there are things I'm trying to transmit. And I'll tell you, first, it was so meaningful that Marcelo Bronstein asked me to give the Kavanah, the mindfulness service, before I sounded the shofar. I'm not sure there are many shofar blowers who have been privileged to be able to say what they're trying to do before they do it. And that has been so meaningful to me, and also has enhanced what I'm trying to transmit. And the fact that the congregation knows what I'm trying to do and can take that away has just been so powerful.
Beautiful. So the next question here was from Pauline. Says, is it possible to listen with awareness and blow at the same time? The sound from it is very urgent, not to be ignored.
It's not easy. It's easier than it used to be. I mean, I could say the same for rabbis, like, can you lead prayer and pray? Or cantors, can they lead prayer and have the kavanah while they're praying at the same time? I think it has definitely helped when I've been more focused at what I'm trying to transmit, that I can do that. But it's just so easy not to do that. I mean, the first time I sounded the shofar on Sunday. Sunday, we were in Connecticut. My daughter and son-in-law were there. I said, "You want to hear the shofar?" My son-in-law, the rabbi, said, "Sure." I sounded it without thinking at all. Okay, so like mea culpa,
Mhm.
there was absolutely no kavanah when I was sounding the shofar. Now there was more, right? By the time I get to Rosh Hashanah, there'll be a lot more. So it's not automatic.
Mhm. There's
Great question. Great question.
yeah, there were a couple of others here, directed really at you as shofar blower. I'm wondering how, this is from Harris. Oh, let's do both of them. Harris says, I'm wondering how blowing the shofar modifies the way you hear the shofar when you're not blowing. And also, what techniques do you use to quell the judgment when you listen to someone else blowing the shofar? If that happens to arise.
You got me. I am so I'm probably baseline judgmental anyway. But it's always a challenge. But I can't say there's that part of me that says, actually there's another note in the shofar that they're not getting to. I mean, whether it's long or short is like, who knows? Who knows? But yet that I have to be aware of that judgment part.
Hmm. Hmm.
So every year it's the same thing I throw into the river, the
Yeah,
judgment.
yeah.
So yeah,
And
you
I
got
mean,
it.
and well, and elaborating on that is Harris's question, like, does the experience of being a shofar blower, how aside from the judgment piece, are there other ways that affects your experience when you're listening to someone else blow a shofar?
Uh, I have to say it's really hard to be a participant and not an observer when you're listening to somebody else sound the shofar. It's really hard for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
I have work to do.
Um,
Those who can't do teach, and those who can't teach, Jim. I don't know.
that's the old line, right? Um, this is great. There's some other things that uh, have come in here. This is an interesting question, John. What's your strategy for holding your kavanah and focusing on the breath at the same time while listening? Right? There's a lot of things going on here. You have a kavanah for how you like with the sound you want to make. You're also, the bracha, the mitzvah is lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the sound of the shofar. So that's on the Baal Tokea as well, the one who's blowing the shofar. And so, there's holding that kavanah, there's putting it out, there's also trying to listen at the same time. It's a very uh, potentially self-aware enterprise. And so this question of how you hold that kavanah throughout is a really interesting question.
So, fortunately, both at this point, but also with this shofar that I got from Levi Meisner in Borough Park, um, several years ago. I mean, the first shofar I had, my grandfather bought for me when I was 12. And that's the one I used till about 10 years ago. Till my daughter Leah said, "Why don't you get an easier shofar?" And there's stories about that one, but this happens to be a very easy shofar to blow. So first, I have virtually no anxiety about whether I'm going to make a sound out of this and what the sound is going to be like. So I'm actually focusing, especially on Rosh Hashanah, about trying to transmit my intention of my kavanah, what I've, in the mindfulness service, what I've shared with the congregation, what I am trying to do. So I think for that, I think I'm usually in the moment with sharing the intention. And
It makes me
I think it comes
yeah.
through.
It makes me think of there was an Instagram post I remember last year, I think at some point, that I saw of Yo-Yo Ma. I think it was for like a master class that he was offering, or like in the series master class.
Yeah.
And it was very produced and whatever, but there was a line in it where he talked about, the reason I practice every day is so that when I'm playing for you, I don't have to worry about my technique. I can just have my, essentially I can have my kavanah and
Right.
express that to you, right? And I think like for us to like extrapolate now, so most people on this call are not going to be blowing their own shofar this month or on Rosh Hashanah, right? And yet the practice work is still the practice, right? And I was listening actually this morning to a short little talk by Gil Fronsdal, where he, I think it must have been he was on a retreat or something, but he just mentioned this, a very passing moment. But he said, you know, if you think of, imagine yourself on a lake and you have a rowboat and you're rowing the boat and it's a very calm lake, right? And like you can get from one side to the other really easily. Now imagine you're on the rowboat and there's a strong wind, you know, that's blowing in your face, and you're trying to row the boat, and you feel like you're not getting anywhere. And sometimes with our practice, it can feel like you're in that rowboat where you're not making any progress. I'm not getting anywhere. But what you are doing is you're building strength, right? Like you keep at that, you're building a lot of muscle in that storm, and that's going to serve you, you know, later on. And I wonder just the lesson about, you know, the routine, the discipline of throughout this month, you know, that there is a practice of listening that we're cultivating. There's a practice of listening to an inward voice, a kol shofar that's inside. And so I think that, you know, that comes up for me just as, you know, something for us to be mindful of. Most of us aren't going to be blowing our own shofarot, but we're all going to be, we're all trying to listen. And this is a tool for that listening.
And I would say, but the practice now is not the practice of sounding the shofar. The practice is, what do I want my intention to be?
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't decided yet for Rosh Hashanah. I mean, what it's going to be, but that's my practice. That's why my practice is find like what resonates with me that I want to transmit.
I think that's a good place for us to pause, probably. There's a lot of really good stuff in the chat here. If you want to save the chat, there's 3 dots at the top of the box, and you can click on them and save the chat. We get that question a lot, so now's a good time to do that. I want to thank Rachel Huguet, who's been on our tech today.
Thank you, Rachel.
And do your neighbors complain about the noise? That's a question.
I used
We'll
to
say
practice
that
in the closet. So
yeah.
Fortunately, it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So maybe okay.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time and channel. Until then, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Good.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.